oh my God, the Identity at the Center podcast is now the official podcast of IDPro. I mean, there's some enthusiasm here because I'm extremely excited about this. Identity at the
And
Center.
we are too. So don't let my smooth, calm, collected voice, be that. But yes, it is super exciting.
Yeah. Calm and collected is not so much my thing. But no, it came about at a really good time because IDPro had been doing the IDPro Show, which was a series of videos. We did about 24 of them, where we would interview IDPro members just to learn about how other people, kind of like the first question you start with in the Identity at the Center podcast, starting with how did you end up here? What got you into identity? And just the range of information just coming out of that was brilliant. There wasn't a single one who said, no, this is exactly what I intended my career to be. So, but that was coming to an end. As you both can attest, putting these together is time consuming and can be kind of expensive. And so we were just wrapping it up. I have one more that I need to get posted. And as soon as I'm somewhere where I can actually download and post that, I will. But as we're wrapping this up, Jim reached out to me and said, hey, what do you think of this idea of making Identity at the Center the official podcast of IDPro? And I'm like, yes, this is great. And I said, sure, that sounds like a lovely idea. Thank you.
This is Identity at the Center. If it has anything to do with IAM, this is the go-to podcast. Now your hosts, Jim McDonald and Jeff Stedman.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff, how are you?
Oh, not so bad. Yourself?
I'm good, man. It's spring. Actually, I had my lawn mowed today for the first time in like 6 months, and it happened about an hour ago. So imagine that timing. Got lucky that it wasn't during the episode because I'm sure you wouldn't be happy with all that noise in the background. But I got to say, I'm not real happy with your camera. What the heck's going on?
Yeah, I'm not happy either. 45 minutes before showtime, my normal Sony camera decided that it wouldn't want to stay on anymore and kept overheating. So I think there's probably a new camera in line. This is the second time that I've tried to fix this week. But yeah, so I'm slumming it amongst the peasants on a webcam today. So we'll just have to kind of deal with it.
I know we're usually used to crystal clear Jeff, and we had AI Jeff for a while. Now it's just normal Jeff, peasant Jeff.
I'm just Jeff. That's all I can do. Maybe I could do some things in post-production to fix colors or do something. I don't know, but we'll see. Look, camera. Let's hope the content is better than the camera this week.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's spring. It's time for, getting outside, enjoying the fresh air, not checking your retirement balance because that's probably not so good. It's just time to kind of get ready for summer.
Yeah. Let's just leave it at that. Let's maybe talk conferences, Identiverse. Like, where do you want to start, Jim?
Yeah, well, that's where I was leading things was, summer to me is conference season. Sebastian Rohr posted he sold me out on LinkedIn. He said, really the reason you're going to Europe is to hit as many Identiverse as you possibly can. There's a little more to it than that,
But there's nothing wrong with that. Come on. I mean, that's a totally legitimate reason.
I appreciate that, Jeff. I totally agree. I mean, getting out there, meeting people, enjoying a beer, why not?
Yeah, I mean, we got a great community. Take advantage of it. I mean, the Identiverse thing is pretty cool. I think we're going to try to hit one in Berlin, I think the day before EIC. And we were talking in the Slack channel, and our friend Espen sent me a link to Martin Sandrin's Identiverse tracker on GitHub. So for people who are interested in that sort of thing, Martin's done a great job of kind of collecting that information. And then I'll put that in our show notes. But I know Espen's working on, I think there's actually a website. So I'm not sure if it's up and running yet or if it's been updated. But there is lots of events all over the world, really. And so it's a great community. Take advantage.
Yeah, I think one of the things that has been so great about doing this podcast with you is that we've got to meet great people like Martin and like Espen, who are really community builders in their own right. I mean, they're out there putting these events together, making sure people know about them and creating this welcoming environment. And that's what makes I think the identity community is so special. I don't obviously know what all the other non-identity communities are like, but I know this one's very welcoming. And, as evidenced by the episode today, we've got the president from the, I know I'm going against the grain here by talking about our guests for today, but the IDPro has been a great rally point as well for this community.
Yeah. So, we're going to get to her in a second here. But yes, and not the president, because I know she's going to correct it, but the executive director for IDPro. But for people who aren't familiar, we're going to have a chat with Heather here in a couple of minutes and really kind of get into that. We made some waves on an announcement. One of the most popular things that I've posted in a long time on LinkedIn, got a lot of traction. So we'll talk about that in a second. But I'm looking forward to seeing her at a couple of conferences that you and I are both going to be at. We're going to be at EIC in a couple weeks. So by the time people listen to this, hopefully they've got things booked and we'll see them there. But that's May 6th through the 9th. That's the European Identity and Cloud Conference. And if you use the code IDAC25MKO, that'll get you 25% off. We'll have a link in our show notes so you don't have to remember all that stuff. You can go ahead and click there. It's also on our homepage, idacpodcast.com. I always put our discounts right on the homepage there. And then after that, Jim, we're going to be at Identiverse in Las Vegas. That is June 3rd through the 6th. And if you use the code IDV25-IDAC25, you get 25% off. Again, those codes will be in our show notes. She is a world traveler. I already know what my first question is going to be when I introduce you here, but let's get Heather Flanagan, the Executive Director for IDPro, on the show. She's been with us before, but although it's been a while, too long, in fact, episode 228 back in August of 2023. So I'm not going to ask her our traditional first question of how'd you get into identity because she's already answered that. But welcome to the show, Heather.
Hello, Jeff. Hello, Jim. It's good to see you both again.
Well, it's great to have you here. So let me ask the most pertinent question top of mind for me. Where in the world is Heather Flanagan today?
Well, physically, I'm currently in Mountain View, California, attending the Internet Identity Workshop. But that's like today. On Monday, I was at MIT for a private workshop with some incredibly smart people, and that was an all-day thing. And last week, I was at the University of Reading facilitating an unconference for Academic Identity Federation people. So bouncing around the world, as one does.
Well, as one does. You say that so nonchalantly, like everyone's flying coast to coast and all around the world all the time. A little bit of an outlier there, Heather, to be honest.
All right, look, just because the flight attendants tell me I'm traveling more than they do, you're suggesting that this is excessive?
Hey, there's nothing wrong with it. Travel's awesome. Everybody should be able to do it. I think maybe if you're on a first name basis with flight attendants, maybe there's something to say about that. Maybe vary up your flight schedule a little bit. But I'm a fan of travel. Get out, see the world, see other, countries, cultures, people, all that good stuff. So I think it's great that you get out there.
Conference rooms in basements with no windows. Yes, I see a lot of those.
All the terrible hotel Wi-Fi that you can try to connect to. So, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So we made some waves recently, Heather. We made an announcement. Yeah. So for those who haven't seen or heard or visited our webpage in a little bit, Identity Center is now the official podcast for IDPro, which is fantastic because Jim and I have been members for a long time and been very big supporters of it. I guess take us behind the scenes maybe of, how did that kind of come together? Or, we obviously have our version of it, but it's like, hey, it's probably not as complicated as people thought it was. but I just want to get your thoughts on that announcement.
So it's kind of funny how you said it. You said it in just a lovely, flat tone. Yes, Identity at the Center is now the official podcast of IDPro, which is not at all how I say it. How I say it when it comes up is like, oh my God, the Identity at the Center podcast is now the official podcast of IDPro. I mean, there's some enthusiasm here because I'm extremely excited about this. Identity at the
Center. We are too.
Center.
So don't let my smooth, calm, collected voice, be that. But yes, it is super exciting.
Yeah. Calm and collected is not so much my thing. But no, it came about at a really good time because IDPro had been doing the IDPro Show, which was a series of videos. We did about 24 of them, where we would interview IDPro members just to learn about how other people, kind of like the first question you start with in the Identity at the Center podcast, starting with how did you end up here? What got you into identity? And just the range of information just coming out of that was brilliant. there wasn't a single one who said, no, this is exactly what I intended my career to be. So, but that was coming to an end. As you both can attest, putting these together is time consuming and can be kind of expensive. And so we were just wrapping it up. I have one more that I need to get posted, and as soon as I'm somewhere where I can actually download and post that, I will. But as we're wrapping this up, Jim reached out to me and said, hey, what do you think of this idea of making Identity at the Center the essential podcast of IDPro? And I'm like, yes, this is great. And I said, sure, that sounds like a lovely idea. Thank you.
Excellent negotiator for sure. Yeah. No, it's super cool. Like, you guys have a great show, and we're happy to support, everything that IDPro does. And I think it's a natural alignment for us because we try to be vendor neutral, especially on our sort of normal episodes. Yes, we do some sponsored stuff, but as you said, running a podcast is expensive. So we try to defray some of those costs with it. And look, we're such big fans of IDPro, right? I've been a member since I think the beginning, 2017 or whatever it was. I think when it was announced at the Chicago conference, I think Jim followed pretty closely right after, I think, as he found out. And we've been, somewhat active, I think, in the Slack channel, and maybe we'll be more active now. I've tried to be more active over the last couple of weeks with the announcement, but it's such a good community. It's such a good resource for really everybody in the space, whether you're just starting out, if you're curious about what the heck this IAM thing is, or if you've been in the space for like decades, or maybe for some people centuries. It could be, a great resource. And there's so many different chat channels. It's not like we just talk about identity. Like, I think I see something in the Identiverse conference channel talk about people going to see the John Wick experience at Area 15, which, like, I'm all in for that. Like, that sounds awesome. Area 15 is very cool, by the way. If nobody's ever been there, definitely check it out. But there's such a good community, and I keep coming back to this word of community because it is that. This is not secret sauce for a lot of people. We're all in this typically, right, to protect our users, reduce risk, make things easier for folks, right, all that kind of things. And yes, there's vendors and stuff like that who have products in that space. But generally speaking, most of us are like, yeah, that's a great idea. We should do that too. And, all these really smart people getting together and learning from each other is just super awesome. So I couldn't be happier, even though maybe my tone is a little bit even and cool.
So let me talk a little bit about the Slack instance, because I think that's the single, I don't know if I want to call it the single best thing that IDPro offers, but it's certainly the single best member only benefit that IDPro offers, because it is not a free Slack instance. It is a paid for Slack instance, which means we have got years of history. So if you go into, say, the SAML channel, there's just so much material there that people can learn from. There are at last check, about 120 different channels. Obviously, some are more active than others. And they do range from authorization, authentication, IGA, passwordless, human factor, IdentiPets, very important. We've got to have a place to share our cat and dog photos. Pit Boss, if you're into smoking barbecue, there's like a little crew that does that too. There is conference submissions is one of my favorite Slack channels, because that's, anecdotally speaking, my observation in going to all of these conferences that I do is that so many of the speakers are IDPro members. And I think part of that is because we have this conference submission channel where we give each other feedback as soon as a call for papers opens. It gets announced there, and you can say, hey, I've got this idea, and you iterate on it with a community to say, is it good? Does it make sense? Is it compelling? Would you want to go to this? And the acceptance rate feels like it is fairly high. So it's great resource.
It's a good way to like peer review and say, yeah, is this a good idea or not? Or am I just crazy? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that has come out of the identity space that's been like, yeah, this is just an idea. I think Ian Glazer was, one of those things recently, this whole modern identity concept that he kind of put out there, and it's like, all right, here's this thing. Have fun, go play with it, right? Expand on it.
Pretty much. I mean, of course, we do have more resources that aren't member only, and yet that membership helps support, like the IDPro Body of Knowledge, which is, my other favorite thing, because before I was executive director, I was and remain the principal editor for the Body of Knowledge, which, that we've got close to 36 articles there written by subject matter experts that I then get peer reviewed by not necessarily IDPro members, but usually come in and say, is this right? Does this make sense? Is this useful and is it, as we always say, vendor neutral? Giving people a place to start to just try and understand where do I even pull the thread to start learning about what's critical in identity.
And I'm glad you mentioned the body of knowledge, because that was the other thing I was going to bring up, because really a lot of the knowledge that goes into that, and it's a lot of just really good, well-written, smart articles and blogs and explainers and pretty much everything you can hope for, really kind of feeds into the CIDPRO certification. So maybe you can kind of tell us a little bit about the CIDPRO certification, because I know that was kind of a momentous event to get something out there.
It was. Putting that together was a lot of fun. That's another concept that we wanted to have some kind of certification that people who have 2 years of experience in the identity space, that's actually a really important point, the experience point, would be able to take this exam, pass the exam, and be able to demonstrate a baseline of understanding more broadly. The questions were put together by subject matter experts, going through, in partnership with people who actually know how to write test questions, which proves to be a lot harder than you would think it should be. And then turning that out into the world. It's about time for it to be refreshed. When we first put the exam together, one of the things that was interesting was, of course, the body of knowledge isn't a complete resource. If you read everything in the body of knowledge, that wouldn't be really quite enough to give you everything to pass the exam. One, you do need operational experience. Two, we didn't have that many, nearly as many articles as we do today. So it's the core resource to support the CIDPRO, but it's not the only resource. And if you go to the website, you can see the other things that we reference, some of which intimidate the heck out of people, because we're like, yeah, NIST 863 is a resource you should be familiar with. To which people have come to me saying, wait, I have to know all the gory details of the entirety of NIST 863. And I'm like, well, no, but you do need to know what it is. Kind of
something like
that.
Or if it's something like, recite the first verse and passage of SAML or something like that, right? I would love to see, and it's just me personally speaking, right? There's a lot of, I would say, less technical identity people. But how can we include them as part of this? Because I think, right or wrong, there is sort of a, perception that if you're an identity person, you're a technical person. That is not always the case. So how do we help maybe some of those folks to be something maybe interesting to tackle? I've talked with Andy Hindle about this, sort of the business of IAM is sort of the way I kind of put it, because it's such an important part. Yes, the technology standards are great. Yes, understanding, what the difference between SSO and MFA and 2FA, right? And all this other stuff might be good knowledge, but it doesn't do any good if you can't actually get your organization to do anything about it. So I think ideas right on maybe ways to, get the business side of IAM up and running. I think that's an area that might be interesting to explore for the future. Just an idea.
I think it's a good idea. When people do ask me about the, I'm not technical. How do I engage? I'm like, well, I'm a librarian with a history degree, as it turns out, it takes all kinds, the things that I do in the world today involve, helping engineers and developers and architects stay organized, right? Because as it turns out, they're usually not very good at that. Bless them. But they need that. There's this gap of, if everybody was technical in the same way, then you would fail. You wouldn't have all of the resources that you need. You wouldn't have the people that actually know how to communicate really well. You wouldn't have people that actually can project manage, which is its own skill set. You wouldn't have necessarily the business strategic thinkers, as you point out, right? It does take all kinds. And those folks that step away going, yeah, but I can't read a spec and understand it, therefore I couldn't possibly participate. I can't read a spec and understand it. So that's not the bar that you should be aiming for.
I totally agree with that. Yeah, I mean, there's just, you mentioned it kind of early on when you first joined in, and we were talking about the IDPro show and all the very backgrounds, right? We start with our show, right, as well. It's like, okay, so how'd you get into the space? The vast majority of people did not choose identity. That's just a working theory I've had for years, and it seems to have proved itself out, at least in our data that we've collected. There is so much room for all kinds of sorts. I feel like if you've got the attitude and the desire, there is a spot for you, right? And there's places to learn and stuff like that. It may take a little bit to maybe get where you want to go, right? Depending on sort of, how long you've been in the space and connections and stuff like that. But I'm totally a fan of it. One thing that I think is really interesting that I want to pivot a little bit here is to talk about the Identity Salon. It's something I wanted to ask Andy about last time he was on the show. Didn't get a chance to do it. Tell me about the Identity Salon, and are you an identity stylist?
Here, let me toss my hair. So the Identity Salon came out of an interesting observation in the same way that unconferences came out of the observation that so much of the useful conversation happens in the hallways. So why don't you just have a meeting of hallway conversations? This came out of the observation that a lot of the we'll pick on Identiverse, which I'm chief of staff for that conference again this year, right? So, but it's obviously one of my favorite events. But I'm going to pick on it for a minute because it's aiming to have anywhere between 3,000 and 5,000 people attend, and it needs to find the common denominator for what would be of most value to the most people attending. Okay, that's reasonable. But what about the other people, right? What about the people who have been the enterprise architects for 15 or 20 years, or the people who are very, very senior? They're not going to get anything out of Identity 101. They're just not. They might go to support people, but that's not really what the conversation they want to have. On top of that, you get an interesting challenge of when you bring in the enterprise architects from big companies, like big automotive companies or something like that. They can't necessarily talk about what they're doing in a public venue. So here's where the Identity Salon comes in. It is what we're trying to do is put together a space for these senior level people to come in and talk about the challenges that they're seeing as 10-year horizon problems, not the how can I deploy passkeys, which is certainly an important conversation to have, but maybe it's the, okay, assuming passkeys have been deployed, what's the next thing? What's the problem we haven't come close to solving yet that we're going to have to figure out how to do in our environments? On top of that, it's held under the Chatham House rule, which you really should have asked Andy about that because it comes across so much better when a British person sets that out. But suffice to say, Chatham House rule means that while you can use the information that you received from an event, you cannot attribute that information. And so you don't say, hey, Andy said, and Andy is affiliated with Hindle Consulting. I can totally pick on him for this because everybody knows he's involved. That offers an interesting level of freedom to the enterprise architects because they can do a lot more conversation about what's happening in their world, knowing that information will be held in reasonable confidence. So we had our very first proto event just before Authenticated last year. We had our second full day in-person event in March, and we try intervening have virtual events. We keep these events small because the important part is having conversations. We have a newsletter that comes out after the events that talks a little bit about what we have. We have reports that come out of these events that goes into a lot more detail. And someone asked me, can you write a report under the Chatham House rule? Yes. And I happen to be very good at that, actually, because I never remember anybody's name. So I just type away. But all this documentation, which then becomes useful and that they can take back in. If people are interested in getting their name on the list as we're looking to mix up who's going to be in the next conversation, go to the identitysalon.com and you can see more information. It's right now, it's entirely supported by essentially by sponsors, but the sponsors don't get the list of who attended. For example, right? There are limits. They do get their logo in front of people, depending on the level they come in. They do get thought leadership white papers that can be added to the report. But we might be moving into a more of a subscription model going forward, but we haven't decided that. It's still pretty darn new for us, so we're exploring opportunities.
I think it's such a cool idea, and I think you kind of addressed my natural follow-up question is, how does one get involved? Is this invite only? Is this, you submit an application and sort of get reviewed to see if that makes sense? If I said, okay, I'd like to be in a discussion like this, or I think I have something to share. Like, what's my step to try and get involvement here?
Your step is to go to that website, and at the bottom of the page, there is a link to, for more information, sign up here. And that gets you on the list that Andy, Ian, and I see. And from there, that, like I said, as we think about the next in-person event will be before Authenticate, and we'll be thinking of what does the agenda for that need to be, and therefore what would be the best mix of people in the room. And if you don't make it in the room, but you're on the list, you may end up getting the report anyway. So, and the virtual events are not quite as strict, though they are also held under the Chatham House rule.
I love the Chatham House rule. This podcast is under the Chatham House rule too, so you can quote Jim McDonald without saying Jim McDonald's name. Just kidding. We put our ideas out there all the time, and they may be right or they may be wrong. So I guess maybe it is Chatham House rule. I like that. As far as what you mentioned about the Identity Salon, we'll put the link in the show notes. I also wanted to comment, you brought up the NIST 800-63, and you mentioned that as kind of a starting point for people. I sometimes refer to that as like the Bible of identity and access management. And whether or not you agree with that, there's another, I heard Jim McDonald say, but I've said that before, that I kind of see it that way. I've been aware of it since 2014. It just gives a framework for thinking about placing the proper identity controls based on the context of the situation, the risk presented by the access. We've had Ryan Galuzzo. He's, the person kind of writing the revision right now, or leading the writing of the revision of 863. So I'd say go back and check out some of those episodes for people who are interested in learning more. I'd also say there's a lot of content out there on YouTube as kind of a starting point. But I think, as you hopefully get more interested in the topic, it's something that you can actually read the paper from end to end. There's 3 parts, A, B, and C. So I think that's great advice in terms of one of the great references in terms of how to think about applying identity controls. What I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, I'll give you a softball question. The Identity at the Center podcast is definitely internationally focused. So about a third of our listeners are based in the US. The rest are throughout the world. From using the Slack channel for IDPro, from just kind of seeing the membership list and knowing who these folks are, they're global. Is IDPro a global organization?
Absolutely. We regularly have people participating from Australia, from Japan, of course, from Europe. We don't have quite the African representation that I really wish we had. But it is I think the barrier to entry in terms of people feeling, there's 2 things that are preventing people from feeling necessarily comfortable in participating in something like IDPro. One of which is whether they feel comfortable with English as the primary language. That is something that people often struggle with. And the other thing is the culture of openness is not universal. And so, the fact I am perfectly happy to post and say, I don't know something, help. That's not a universally comfortable concept. And so there are a lot of cultures where, they'll come in, they'll lurk, but they won't necessarily participate because you just don't want to be seen as stupid.
Right.
So,
oh, that's a great point. Now, in terms of the manifestation of that global presence, I mean, Jeff and I are attending EIC for the first time. It's our first international identity conference. I see that there's a lot of presence from IDPro people in terms of the speaker list. Talk to me about IdentyPro's, presence there at EIC.
We are one of their partners, and we're expanding that partnership actually with Cup Near Cold to be even more than just the EIC conference. But I'll have a separate announcement about that in the future. Suffice to say that's happening. We have for the past several years, we've had a workshop on Tuesday before the formal start of the conference, and this year is no different. we have a workshop where one of the things, what we're presenting for the audience's consideration is job descriptions. It's an interesting thing, right? How do you actually describe an identity related job? And what do you tell your HR department when you say, okay, I want to hire an architect. What are the requirements? What are we looking for? I want to hire a junior person. What are the requirements? What are we looking for? So Elizabeth Garber, who had been working with IDPro for quite a while, helped put together like the initial library of templates for job descriptions in the identity space that companies could then use, definitely adapt to their more specific needs, because we tried to keep it vendor neutral, but you may put in there as a requirement, no, you must have experience with Entra or something like that, right? But that's the thing we want to put in there to, again, make it just a little bit easier to describe what does an identity professional do, and to sort of seed that through an organization such that you can hand this to your HR department even and say, this is what an identity professional does, and this is what we need. So that's going to be Tuesday morning of EIC.
That's a really cool concept. I mean, I'm sure it's something that everyone has either faced or is going to face in terms of trying to identify identity talent. I mean, I'd love to get your perspective when it comes to the upcoming crop of identity talent. I mean, we hear about all the time that there's a real shortage of talent, and at the same time, a lot of folks reach out to me and they're looking for that entry level role. It's like everything requires experience. I mean, I'm sure you see that as well. And what are your thoughts, or what kind of tips would you give people?
One of the questions you guys asked me in the first time I was on the show is like, how did I get started in this, right? How did I get started in identity? And I never thought that identity wasn't part of everything I did, right? As a Galacticom bulletin board system operator in 1995, what was my job? My job was figuring out who had, what accounts were needed, who had them, and what they had access to. That's the core of identity management right there. You shift that up to, okay, SunOS 413 for the win. Who has access? What are the groups involved? How do you manage that? You're back to identity, right? Identity is in pretty much every aspect of online services. So if you want to get involved in identity and you don't have experience, you can find it. If you get a job at an organization and you're dealing with online services, then you will have more space to learn about identity than you think you will.
Yeah, I think that's a great point of view. I think, getting something that is related where you're doing some identity work, you start to build that experience, and then it's a jump maybe full-time into the industry. I was thinking about something else about the Slack channel. I constantly see people posting about the Identiverse, and I'm excited. I've never been to an Identiverse. I don't know if you have. And I always wondered, how did Identiverse start? Do you know how the concept came about? And is there any kind of linkage between IDPro and Identiverse, or is it just like a natural organism that just happens to happen?
It's a mutual admiration society. And I believe Sam Evans started it several years ago. There's no official relationship between the two other than, IDPro members go to Identiverse, and if you're at an Identiverse, you're going to talk about IDPro, and we all love each other very much because, it is awesome. I have been to an Identiverse, and sometimes it gets a little too loud for me because it is such an enthusiastic group. But they are ever so much fun.
So if I remember one thing about you from our last podcast is that you're a Scotch person. Is that okay? Do you have to like beer when you go to Identiverse?
I'm going to sound like an alcoholic at this point, right? I like interesting flavors, and therefore, yes, I like Scotch, and I like the breadth of flavors in Scotch, and it's fun to just deep dive and explore on that. But I also like beer, though not all beers, right? I'm into malty beers, therefore I like the Belgian beers, the English ales, ambers if I have to. I do not understand the concept of an IPA. Why you want to drink a beer that makes your mouth pucker? Completely beyond me. And I cannot drink wheat beers. because I
I
have a
don't
wheat
like wheat beer
intolerance.
either. Oh,
So I used to like them, but I can't drink them anymore. Not since college, actually. So yes, I also drink wine. Thank you. And I don't have a preference between red and white. I have a preference between good and not good, right? I want good wine.
maybe I shouldn't have brought up that whole line of discussion. No, absolutely. So the international angle's well in place, but you guys have, the roots in the starting in the United States and have a pretty big presence when it comes to one of the biggest conferences in the US, Identiverse. Talk to us about IDPro's role at Identiverse and what you have coming up for 2025.
So, as with the EIC, we are considered one of the sort of industry partners to Identiverse. We do have a booth, which we are constantly looking for volunteers to come in and hang out and let people come and say, "Wait, what is IDPro? What is this thing? Why should I care?" Though most often they want to know about the CIDPRO exam. We With my IDPro hat on, I'm one of the two people that does the newcomers session to just introduce people. What does it mean to be at Identiverse? What is it like? What can you expect? That moment of being able to look at this crowd of 200 people and say, welcome all of you introverts to the Identiverse conference. Glance, surreptitiously off from one side to the next because you were surrounded by fellow introverts and you should be able to say hi to them even though you kind of don't want to.
Yeah, one thing that I've never been aware of is linking the two conversations we had. Is there an Identibeer that usually happens at Identiverse?
There's usually an IDPro social, like Wednesday after whatever the conference social is going to be. So it's usually like around 6:30 or so. We still need to get that organized. I have to do that as soon as I get home. But that's usually a thing. It isn't usually an Identibeer, though co-branding that would be totally fine with me. I haven't talked to Sam about it yet, though. I should do that.
Yeah, I kind of get the sense, Identibeer, IDPro, Identity Center podcast, we have one thing in common, which is vendor neutrality. It's not that we're against any vendor, but we don't want to stand for promoting one vendor versus another. That's one thing that I've learned about Identibeer, because I even offered to sponsor the one that we're doing in Oslo, which will be in a couple of weeks. And I was told, well, that's not really the culture. Like I said, I've never been to one before, but the idea is that, hey, everybody, nobody pays anybody else's way at the Identibeer. So I thought that was pretty cool.
That is cool. And it's I like it. One of the reasons I really like the whole vendor neutrality concept is because it pushes people to think about why the product they're using does what it does the way it does. Because if you can learn those underlying principles, it will then serve you really well as to, okay, well, if this behaves this way, it behaves this way for a reason. The next product, the bells, the whistles, the dashboards, they may look all different, but the underlying concepts about identity verification, about group management, about access controls, pick your favorite role-based or policy-based or whatever based, those principles will apply across the board. And as soon as you enforce vendor neutrality, it makes you think about that. So I like that. Yeah,
I at least my understanding, I haven't taken the CIDPRO exam, but that the exam is based on kind of vendor neutral type questions. It's what is the best practice or leading practice for this identity problem, right?
Yep, that's exactly so. I'm going to add one point about the CIDPRO exam. The single hardest thing about the exam, this is like now the inside story. What makes that exam really, really difficult? What is the one thing that people come back to me and say, wow, this was hard? Yeah, it's the proctoring. It's not the questions. It's the actual proctoring experience, because since it's an online, it's an official certification. It's not just a random set of multiple questions. You're actually going through a service where there's someone on the other side staring at you to make sure that you don't. I'm sorry, if you're one of those people that just starts looking off into the distance as you're thinking, oh no, they don't like that, because you might have something written over there. You're not allowed to have a phone. anywhere nearby, any other computers nearby. You're not allowed to have water nearby, right? If they hear sounds, they will ask you to pick up your camera and move it around so that they can inspect your room. And they'll only give you like so many opportunities for that before they just cut you off.
Huh.
So they are strict. And that's not anything that IDPro controls.
Right.
And so people coming in thinking, hey, this is a friendly community, and therefore this is going to be a friendly exam experience. It's not a friendly exam experience. It's a hardcore exam experience.
You heard it here first, folks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's great. Jeff, what do you think we close out this episode?
Well, I feel like we all travel so much, and Heather, you've been fortunate to be a whole bunch of different places. I'm curious, what do you do? I guess, what are you going to do with your off time from traveling? Like, do you have plans? Because I think we're all going to hit conferences in Europe and US, especially over the next month or so. But what are you going to do with your time?
Well, fascinating question. Some of that time will be spent at home, rocking back and forth, just trying to recover from all the amount of time that I've been out on the road.
Well, that's a given. We all do that.
We all do that. But I have to do it really fast because I get to go home on Saturday and I'll be home for 4 days. And then I have to get to Redmond, which is basically 2 hours from my house for the B-Sides Seattle conference. And I'll be there through the weekend. And then I get to come home for 5 days. And then I have to go down to San Francisco because RSA is coming. I won't be at the RSA conference, but I'll be at a pre-event that I need to do. And then I get to go home for 5 days. And then I have to fly out to Berlin for EIC. From EIC, I don't get to go home. I have to go to New York City for AuthCon, which is a new conference being put on by Fusion Auth. Great. So I'll be there for a week. Then I get to come for 2 whole weeks. It's like the biggest break that I actually have in the foreseeable future. And then it's Identiverse. After Identiverse, I don't get to go home. I have to go to something called TNC. It used to stand for the Terrain and Networking Conference. And it's a global conference for national research and education networks and academic identity federations. And that'll be in Brighton in the UK. And then I get to come home for about 10 days. And then I have to go to Geneva for a global collaboration summit about standards development and the geopolitical landscape that is making things a character building experience. The week after that is still in Geneva, where I'm trying to go to the ITUT standards meeting because I'm addicted to standards development. And I think it's fascinating. And I want to see what the ITU is like in their standards process. But you have to become accredited. And I have submitted my application to attend. We'll see how that goes. Then I have a week off. I'm not bothering coming home because why? And then it's the IETF meeting, which will be in Madrid. My sweetheart and I had a conversation about this July thing. And I'm like, honey, I don't know what to do. I don't think I can come home. He's like, no, don't come home. But if you're going to be away for that 1 week, you have a break, you have to take vacation. I'm requiring that you take vacation. And I was like, wow, how do you do that? Okay, what do I do? Well, then it was all right, I'm going to be in Europe.
You didn't sit down and then write a blog on this. Okay, I need to define what vacation is and let some standards and some parameters around this and so forth.
Yes, that's exactly kind of what I did actually. And I chose a place though. I chose a place by how relaxing will it be and how unlikely is it that there will ever be a conference there. And so I probably won't ever get to it. And so I'm going to spend a week in Malta.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I'm pretty excited about that.
And just take in the sights and sounds, or are you the kind of person who has activities throughout the day, or are you just I'm going to get there and then I'm just going to kind of splay out and just kind of see where the currents take me?
So I am a person that would like to become basically bedrotting for the win and just not move. But then I have this bad habit of then not eating because it's okay, get up and eat or just continue to lay here. So I really do have to get out at least once a day. But that's okay. I've got this covered. I've got a tour of some wineries. I've got several art tours scheduled. All of this is being planned in advance because I'm a planner. That's what I do.
Jim, what would you do with, I guess, a week off in between? I mean, I know we were going to EIC and you spent a week before that, but what's a recharge cycle for you look like?
That is a recharge cycle for me for this year. First off, I just wanted to say just something that was occurring to me is we've been having this whole podcast, which is all that Heather does for the standards community. So thank you. I'm going to say thank you on behalf of all of us for doing what you do. And I mean, bouncing around the world sounds glamorous, especially for folks who don't do it for a living. You go to all these places, that's a little bit hard on the body, right? That's hard on the body, and it's hard to have any kind of meaningful relationships with people that were like family and stuff, because you can't just say, hey, I'll be over for dinner every Sunday night for family dinner or whatever, right? So you're putting in a lot of your life force energy into this, so thank you.
It's true. I will point out my sweetheart is probably the most introverted human I have ever met in my life. And that's with all of the standards people I hang out with. When we're at home, when we live in a very small house, it's a 100 square meter house, we still text each other. We're sitting in the same room. We're looking at each other. We're still texting each other, right? And he does not travel with me because that would involve dealing with humans. And no, just no. So
and it would be expensive.
It would be annoying for him, which is actually the more important point. He would
you can't put a price on. I mean,
you can't put a price on the level of irritation he would experience. So that part's not too bad. The physical exhaustion, you're absolutely right. When COVID happened, it was so relaxing. But it took me 18 months to recover from all the travel that I do.
Yeah, it takes a while.
It does take a while.
So I was thinking about the whole thing that Jeff asked you, like, are you like a hyper planner for your vacation? Well, so I'm going to Oslo and then to Denmark before EIC. I've never been to either one. And I've been watching so many YouTubes that I feel like I'm going to get there. There's going to be nothing to see because I've already seen it all on YouTube at least 3 or 4 times, because I'm trying to make sure that not only do I see all the things that I want to see and do all the things that I want to do, but that I have them mapped out so that I'm not just traveling zigzag all over the city, so that I'm hitting them in the right order.
So let me point something out. You've probably experienced the difference between talking to someone on the podcast, and so you have them in a nice little box, and you can have a great conversation, and then seeing them in person and actually getting a hug and the whole body experience of communication. It's different. That, for me, that's why I travel, because I cannot have the relationship building that I need to through a little box on my screen. Going to Oslo, going to Denmark, going anywhere, any kind of travel, you can see everything in the little box on your screen in YouTube. And it is nothing compared to that visceral reaction of actually being able to see the thing, as expansive as it may be.
Well put. Yeah, no, exactly what I'm looking forward to. And, but I still am probably over planning this thing to the point where it's like, I know how many miles each thing is from my hotel, but part of it is like, I don't want to be traveling the whole time. I want to, have the hotel and then 4 days to go and do all these things and, have the hot dog at the street food vendor that I saw in a YouTube video or something like that. And I think that would, I don't know. I usually don't do that. I'm usually much less planned out, but I feel like we have limited time, and to get all these things in, it's going to require a little bit of pre-thought. And I also don't want to have regret later that, oh, we didn't see all those great things because we didn't do enough research. If I'm not aware of something in Oslo or Copenhagen by now, after all the videos I've watched, it's not from a lack of trying.
It's as long as you leave in flexibility, right? But planning to the extent, to from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. is fine, as long as you're still comfortable with, you know what? I'm tired today. I don't really feel like that 10-mile walk to get to this thing. So there are going to be other times probably I won't do that. As long as you build in that level of comfort in yourself of being able to say no, not today, you'll be fine.
Absolutely. How are you approaching your trip, Jeff?
100% the opposite of you, Jim. Right now I have a flight to Berlin, and then I have a flight out of Amsterdam 2 weeks later. So that's about as far planning as my wife and I have gotten. She's going to join me in Berlin towards the end of the week. And then the plan right now is to go from Berlin to Amsterdam, probably by train. We haven't figured that part out. I still don't have a hotel for Amsterdam. And then we're going to figure out like a day trip somewhere using sort of Amsterdam as sort of like the base from there, and then fly home from there, a week after EIC is over. So I haven't figured it out yet. So I honestly don't know how to answer that, other than I know I have a way into Germany and a way out of Amsterdam. How I get between the two is still up to be, decided. But I'm kind of a little bit more relaxed on vacation. I'm like, all right, let's just go there, and then let's just kind of hang out and see where the wind takes us. And we did this for London last year, where the whole point of the trip was to go see the Cubs play the Cardinals baseball game. Jim, I'm sure you'd appreciate that. And we spent a week, I think, there. The game was on Saturday. We came in early, and we basically just picked a direction. It was the first time either of us had actually been in London proper. And we picked a direction and just walked. And when we got tired of walking, we'd stop into a pub or something and get drinks or food or whatever it may be. And then when we were kind of done for the day, we would take an Uber from however far we got out back to the hotel. And then we would just kind of, play it easy at the hotel and then do the same thing the next day. So we just picked different directions. I imagine this is probably going to be kind of similar. I feel like it's the first trip out to these places. So, there's that desire. I totally get Jim. I was like, I want to see everything. It's just not reasonable. I've already kind of put it in my head, like, look, we're not going to see everything. Like, let's just pick the things that are most important, and then we'll adapt on the fly as needed. My wife's great to go at that, and she's, on board with that kind of thing. So, and if it's super cool, we can always try to go back, right? Maybe it's EIC next year or 2 years from now or something else, right? Or maybe, whatever happens, right? We end up somewhere else for work or something like that, right? So I'm a little more, I guess the short version, Jim, I'm opposite.
Yeah, no,
haven't played anything yet.
I think it's great that you're opposite. And by the way, it's not like I'm doing this planning because I feel like I have to. I'm doing this planning because I'm really enjoying it. Like, watching these videos gets me excited about going, and here's all the things that I can do. And coming up with that map that I did wasn't because like, oh no, I have to sit down and create this map. It was because I wanted to see where all these different things were in relation to each other. So that's the reason I'm doing it. I like doing it.
I do the map thing only if I'm going someplace that I'm not familiar with. And I love things like Google Street View. It's like, okay, let me get familiar with the surroundings. Okay, here's what to expect. Here's where this is going to be at, and so forth. But I don't go into like the logistics and planning of like the most optimal path of all the different things around it. So that's it. All right. Why don't we wrap it up for this week? Heather, it's a pleasure to see you virtually. We will see you in real life in the next couple of weeks over at EIC and then again at Identiverse. Thank you again for working with us on the whole partnership thing. I'm looking forward to see where this goes. We have lots of IDPro members, guests, all kinds of stuff, and I'm sure ideas are cranking in our heads of what are things that we can be doing together over the next several weeks, months, however long this goes. So I'll have links in our show notes for people to check out, Heather. So your LinkedIn, the idpro.org website. So definitely want to check that out. I'll have a link to the Identity Salon, which sounds super cool and interesting. I want to talk to you about that after the fact. And then, for us, we're on the web, idacpodcast.com. We have our YouTube channel, which we're still trying to grow. So feel free to give us a like and subscribe there. Definitely helps. And definitely seen a lot of viewers come on board in the last couple of months. So I'm trying to do more shorts and things like that. And maybe that's working. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But give us a like and subscribe anyway. And with that, we'll go ahead and leave it for this week. Thanks for watching and or listening. And we'll talk with you all in the next one.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.